How do you become a GTO beast? Well, what you don't do is stare at hand chart after hand chart, sim after sim, looking at frequencies. Oh, this hand is betting 16% of the time for this sizing, 31% of the time for this sizing. What a load of shit. What a waste of time, guys, am I right? If you want to get good at GTO, what you should really do is watch this video. Watch somebody who's already good at GTO, at least I claim to be. Let's see how I get on against Trainer today. Solving spots in real time, showing you what they would think about in-game and why, and then getting feedback from a better player than them. Let me just specify something. The Trainer, the Solver, is a better player than me, only theoretically. The Trainer fucking sucks at like exploiting people, so it would actually have a really low win rate in some games that humans would crush. Discuss that in the comments, it's true. I think I could beat 25NL way, way harder than Solver could. But in its realm, the theory realm, it's my teacher, so let's let it teach. Okay, Queen Jack, what are we going to do here? We have a little RNG here on screen to help us with our decisions, help us become a GTO beast. 97 is a very passive action, so I already know that this hand is going to be a call, but that's not how I'm going to think about it. I'm going to start by actually saying, is this going to be a pure call, or can I ever raise here against a small bet? My opponent is not betting all of their range. Some of your opponents will do that, and that's a key distinction that you want to be aware of, but they will be betting quite frequently on this board. So I do think that this hand can raise. I don't think it's ridiculous or anything. I think there's a little fancy trick here that when you have a club in your hand, you want to raise a bit more because you'll unblock the backdoor flush draws that they can call you with, so it makes you raise more for value. But that aside, I think this hand could raise sometimes, but it's going to call this time based on that number. And as we can see, the raise percentage for that combo is very small. I'm not going to pull up hand charts at all today. We're literally just going to stay in the Trainer looking at the cards as they fall. So we check turn. They bet again. Am I ever folding this hand? I don't think so. One reason I would never fold this hand is I think it's actually what we would call a value beater in the Carrot Poker School. And a bluff catcher is basically a hand that can only beat bluffs, doesn't beat any value. A value beater can chop or beat at least one of the value combos in Villain's range. So I don't think it's unreasonable that Villain could be actually value betting here with something like Queen Jack, and therefore we can chop with those. I don't think Jack 9, Jack 7, things like that are going to bet for this sizing. Maybe Jack 10, but definitely Queen Jack. So I think this is a value beater. It's never going to fold, therefore we're only going to be folding hands that are bluff catchers or worse, and a Jack is a very good bluff catcher anyway for the most part, so it's probably not folding regardless. And when it comes to raising here, we're not going to be raising this hand ever, I wouldn't think. I would think this is just a pure call, so it says call okay, 100%. Down here, there's a little nifty display where it's going to tell us our EV. I'm not saying you have to go out and get PIO 2 so you can do the Trainer, but what you do want to do is pay attention to this as we go through this series and become a GTO beast. Every time I say this throughout this video, I'm going to get progressively more and more ridiculous. If you make it all the way to the end, I'll be saying it really ridiculously by the end. As we can see here, the EV of every play apart from call is kind of a disaster. What do these numbers mean? Well, the top number there, where it says 100%, is the frequency that you should call at. If call is the best line, you should take it 100% of the time. You shouldn't ever be mixing in an inferior line. You're only allowed to mix in GTO when the EV is the same, and here it's not. So folding would be worth 0 EV. Raising huge would be worth very close to 0 EV because you'd be crucifying the hand like completely. And raising small would be like a pretty big mistake of 1 big blind. This is a 5-10 game. So when you see that call is worth 50 odd chips and raise is worth 40, that means you're losing 10 chips or $10 1 big blind by making that mistake. That's really bad in a pot that's, you know, currently only 27 big blinds. Losing a whole big blind there is pretty bad. Anyway, we check. Villain decides to what? Oh, a double paired. Villain got really nitty on the river with a flush. Okay, fair enough. Sometimes solvers will check back a bit tighter than you might think because they are very worried about being check raised, not just for value, but being bluffed as well. It can happen. Humans don't tend to do that as well. Okay, easy fold, nothing to say here. But as you can see, it'll tell us the EV of call. EV of call is minus 4.34. It's about a small blind you're losing there. If you call that hand, pretty obvious that we shouldn't. Okay, King 10 against this. Clearly raise is going to be an option here with the 10 of hearts and with a gutter. The question is, how often is raise going to be the play? I'm going to guess that this hand is going to raise, and this is an important protocol. I actually want to say how often I think it raises before I look at the RNG. This is something that Luke Johnson taught me, one of my co-streamers from Carrot Corner. Like when a channel first existed on Twitch, he would come on the show sometimes and we would do some work on this sort of thing. He's a very, very strong high stakes kind of theoretician player. So he kind of said, Pete, you need to make sure that you decide on the frequency before you look at the RNG, instead of just glancing at the RNG as a cop-out and be like, it's quite high, I'll just do this. So I'm going to stay true to form and do my new thing that I've been doing for the last year, which is doing it that way around. I think this hand will probably raise about, I'm going to say 25%. Now, I tend to round things to the nearest 25 because I don't want to become an absolute, I don't know, just a complete dweeb that's going to sit there and be like, 17.1%. I don't want to do that. You guys don't want to see me do that. That's not part of becoming a GTO boost. It's not part of it. So what we're going to do here is call on an 82. I'm going to say it's about 25% raise. Oh, that's not bad. 27%. Yes, we rounded to the nearest 25 quite well there. I mean, maybe like that nerdy guy would tell me off for not saying 27%, but we'll take it. We'll take it. So usually calling, why are we allowed to call? Well, we have a lot of future fold equity, right? I'll explain why things are the case as well. We can win later by bluffing. We can hit a king or a 10. We can hit a jack. We can backdoor hearts. We eat up the outs of their flush draws so they don't get there as often. Lots of reasons why this hand has quite a lot of EV. Its equity is reasonable. It's probably got about 40-something% equity on the flop against villain's range. Just don't forget king high is just good sometimes, quote unquote. And then we have the implied odds. We have the ability to bluff later. We have all these things. So its EV will actually be very reasonable, even though we're out of position. We check turn, villain checks back, and the question is, do we want to bluff? Well, this spot is one of the theoretical cornerstones of the game. When you know this spot, and it's referenced in the Carrot Poker School as river blunder theorem, very, very important concept, river blunder theorem. Little tidbit for free here from the school. You can check out the school at carrotcorner.com, by the way, if you haven't already. And we say in grade 2, lecture 2, I believe, the river blunder theorem is what happens when we reach the river, having condensed our range, right? Having called a bet, and villain has bet and then checked, so he's polarized and then checked behind. And we have therefore gained a range advantage. Our range is doing very well here. There are 3 types of river that can come, or turn and river configuration that can come after this action sequence of us calling flop and turn checking through. You can get cards that are to do with the flop, but these are even better for us. So like the 9 is to do with the flop. That's to do with the stuff we hung around with, right? That's fantastic. We do amazing by hitting that 9 a lot. Our range also does amazing by hitting this heart a lot, because of course we also had reason to stick about with our flush draws. So very, very good run out for range, very low down in our range with this hand. Definitely an abundance of fold equity here, meaning if you bluff here, don't know if you guys know this, but you will get way more fold equity in theory, in game theory, than your break-even point. That's right, opponents don't meet minimum defense frequency in all spots, not when their range is getting slaughtered, and villain's range is getting destroyed here. The only thing that remains in this kind of complex spot then, we know we're going to bluff this hand because it doesn't have enough showdown value for check to be better than bet. Actually, bet is much better than check. What we want to be doing then is picking a sizing. People get very lost in the weeds here, and the actual fact is it doesn't really matter. The solver will use all of these sizes probably at some frequency, or most of them. It might not use B400 very much on this river because villain has kind of uncapped here as well. To some extent, they're going to have some flushes. They're going to have, if anyone has a boat, I guess it's likely to be, well, no one really. We raise 4s on the flop. I guess villain could have like 3s. Maybe we fold 3s on the flop. But yeah, it's kind of irrelevant. The point is though that villain is a bit too re-nutted by this river for us to use B400. So I think overbet, B75 and B33 are all fine. And what these bet sizes will do when you're bluffing is they will correlate to different value bets within your range. So if you have a hand like Queen 5 here, you could maybe block bet. If you have a hand like King Queen, you could maybe bet big. If you have a hand like a 9, you could bet big. 9 with heart blocker, maybe you could overbet. If you have a flush, you could overbet. You could basically do anything. Because we have a heart blocker with this hand, I think overbet's going to be a frequent choice. I'm going to use overbet probably more than half the time with this hand, or about half the time. Then maybe use the other sizes like a quarter and a quarter or something. So given we've rolled 35 here, I am going to go ahead and overbet. And the solver loves my play. It's like, Pete, you're the fucking best. Actually, Pete, you're not the best because this hand never takes any other sizing. It's actually slightly better EV to overbet than anything else. But as you can see, it's not using the very big B400 size. Look how bad it would be to check. Look at the EV here in the bar at the bottom. This is the thing I want to keep drawing your attention to, is this EV, because people get GTO training very wrong. Nobody is becoming a GTO boost. And the reason for that is that they are doing the wrong thing. They're staring at frequencies. They're like, oh, it's mixing. Oh, look at its frequency for this. It prefers X to Y. What you should really be concentrating on is EV. True EV. Right, clan? The holy grail. The meaning of poker. Everything that matters. I could go on. I won't. So yeah, you have to bluff this hand because your range is at a big advantage. You can pick other sizes. It's not a big EV loss as long as you do bluff, apart from B400, which we don't like here because villain's just uncapped a bit too much. And their most noteworthy flushes are ace-high flushes that had showdown value and wanted to check back turn, like ace-jack or ace-king of hearts or something. And you can't check. Check is the only thing that's really bad. Note that you do have a little bit of showdown value. If you check here, villain doesn't bluff all of their king high. They do check down sometimes, and you will win 1.8 chips here, or about a fifth of a big blind by checking. That doesn't mean checking is okay. Another really common problem that students suffer from here is they think because they have some showdown value that they should check. No, you need a lot of showdown value to check when you have a big range advantage and you're generating tons of fold equity by bluffing. Way more than your break-even point. GTO and MDF are not the same thing, unless ranges are more equal. Okay, 5s on ace jack 10. This is actually closer than you would think. I think it's better to not have a club here. This is triple Broadway though. I actually don't know the answer to this question because I suspect this is very close. I think I would call some pairs here, some under pairs. 5s is possibly a bit low. The lower your under pair, the more big cards villain has. Okay, I'm going to mix like call and fold because I actually have no idea what's right with this hand. So you can call, yeah, 0 EV to call. So it only calls 2% of the time. And the reason I folded was my RNG was kind of high. But yeah, so basically there are two ways that you can be confused in poker. For you guys, the reason that you are mostly confused because you're not a GTO beast at this point in your career is because you don't know what's going on. You don't understand the spot, right? So for you guys, no offense, you're probably confused because you don't know what's going on. When a strong player is confused, i.e. me, hopefully, if you're watching this and trying to learn from me, I'm usually confused because the spot is very close. Sometimes I'm confused because I have no fucking clue what's going on as well. There are spots that baffle me, right? There are spots I haven't studied enough. So I'm not sitting here being like, I know absolutely everything. Like here, I really didn't know, but that's because it's close. Usually, 9 times out of 10 that I don't know what to do, it's because it doesn't really matter much. It's because it's close. So that's important, right? That distinction. Am I confused because it's close? Am I confused because I just have no idea what's going on? And I'm a buffoon. Gotta think about that, guys. Okay, that was obvious, right? We're just gonna fold. First question here is, can we ever raise this hand for value? I think we definitely can. I think against button 1/3, this is gonna be a hand that will raise from time to time. I think it will call more than it will raise. I'll raise at low frequency. Again, I'm rounding to the nearest 25. I'm trying not to be a total dweeb, even though I kind of am. So we're looking to raise this 25% of the time, calling the rest of the time. This is an 84, we're gonna call. Okay, so actually I was wrong there. It's raising closer to 50% would be the nearest 25, not 25%. The hand is just a bit better in EV terms than I thought and can be put in the raising range more often. Now that's not an EV loss. We need to understand that when GTO says, okay, you probably had the wrong idea of the frequency there, Pete, it's not telling me that I've lost EV or anything. It's just kind of saying in the long run, the most closest to GTO strategy is to raise that more often. It doesn't actually matter. Like nothing bad will happen to me there and I don't really care about that, but it's interesting to adjust my parameters slightly. Okay. Another river blunder theorem spot. We have called, villain has checked back. We've reached the river with a big advantage here in EV. The 8 was to do with the flop, so it was good for our range. Our range hung around. It likes stuff that was to do with the flop. Villain's range doesn't. It likes random new stuff coming. So this jack is a card that is not to do with the flop. It has no qualitative similarity to the flop. So this jack is actually going to be really, really good for villain because he's the one betting flop, but jack 9, jack 7, jack 10, queen jack. We fold those on the flop unless they're hearts, usually. Or maybe they're backdoor spades or something. Or maybe like king jack has enough showdown value, we can call it anyway. But most of the jack X combos go in the bin from our range on the flop. So while this jack is a little bit better for villain than it is for us, the 8 is very good for us and the overall action sequence is incredibly good for us. Understanding GTO is all about understanding action sequences and what they do to ranges and then combining them with textures and pre-flop configurations. This is basically the be all and end all of becoming a GTO boost. With this hand, I believe we have a value bettable holding. It's kind of interesting that we have hearts here because what hearts will do is they will have the weird effect where they unblock the opponent's betting range. And that's because the heart bluffs would have bluffed the turn a lot. So villain's main bluffs at this juncture, when he's checked the turn, are not hearts. They're like clubs, they're diamonds, stuff like that. They're not spades either. So when you have hearts or spades here, you will unblock a few more bluffs and there will be some merit in maybe slow playing and just checking here. But I think overall betting is going to be the key thing. Because we actually chop with all of the weaker aces now, our hand is very thin and I'm actually leaning towards block bet here. I think block and check are going to be the two lines for this hand. Am I missing something? Maybe the fact he's just hit a jack a lot means I could use the B75 as well. B75 seems a little thin. Especially on the 8 turn where villain is going to check back more combos of ace, queen, ace, king than he would on a brick. So this I think I'm gonna block on a 10. Am I? Oh, I'm gonna get one wrong eventually, guys. This is gonna go red and it's gonna be really embarrassing. You've noted it's all been green so far. I don't know, man. Okay, let's make a judgment call on this. Can I be 75 here? No, I'm gonna say it's a block. It's a B75 pure. Okay, but the EV difference isn't massive. It's basically 0 EV difference. So this is very harsh. To lose 0.09 chips is like losing 1/10 of a big blind. So I lost 1% of a big blind, in theory, by choosing that sizing. But that's not what's important. What's important is that I underestimated how good my hand was on this node. I thought that it could only block bet. It can actually big bet, and that needs recalibrated. I thought it was close, to be fair, and I was kind of torn. Interestingly, check is not okay with this hand. I guess we are blocking still some bluffs with our 10, and villain just has a very condensed range here. They've hit second pair a lot, which they'll check back, so we need to value bet a lot against that. So that makes sense why we need to just not check here, why we need to value bet. I just slightly underestimated how good the hand was. Look, there's his jack. I told you he loves the jack. That's why we're always betting, never checking. If this is a brick, there might be a bit more checking. He's got a bit more of a polarized range on a brick because his jack X is still air. Kind of weird, right? But it's true. Interesting one. I've overreacted to the 8 here and underreacted to the jack, and that's led me to think my hand is slightly weaker than it is. This red box, don't worry, it's not a problem to lose this much theoretical EV, because in reality you probably lose, it's not even clear what happens, maybe one size is better than the other, and I'm not talking exploits today, right? That would be another topic. In reality, I would always bet big here, and that's because I don't expect to get bluff raised enough if I bet small. But the solver's tricky, it's trappy, it's a bit of a theme that's going to bluff raise me quite a bit. So betting small is not much of an EV loss. Against a human, bet big here though. That's important. I should say these things as I go if I think that, you know, there's an exploit here that's really important to find. Okay, so some hands are hybrids, and a hybrid from Carrot Poker School Grade 3 Lecture 2, I think, is a hand that you would raise for 3 different reasons on the flop, ostensibly. You could raise it for value, bluff, and denial of equity at the same time. This hand I don't think is a hybrid, but what we may see here is that hands like 4, 6, 4, 5, like the really vulnerable 4s with backdoor spades, do raise. I think King 4 is a little bit too stable, if I can use this word, meaning robust, not that susceptible to being outdrawn, because of course villain's most common overcard to the 4 is the King, because the King opens more pre-flop than any other overcard, and we have the King. So if we have a hand like 4 or 5 here, not only do we have extra equity that goes towards our value element of our raise, you know, being able to make the nuts by the river is a value type notion. So we can raise 4 or 5 here, I think. I don't think I would raise King 4, even with spades, and I'm going to pure call this. The solver may raise it a trace here. It may, but I don't think so. It does raise it a trace. Raises it 17%, which actually is simplifiable to the nearest 25 is 25%. So I've just learned that King 4 here is actually a raise. I think what's going on is that because the 4 is so low, and everything has overcards to a 4, that even with the King kicker, one of the less vulnerable kickers, we still want to go ahead and raise. If this was like Ace 8 deuce and we had King 8, I don't think it's ever a raise. Although it depends, if villain's range betting, then you can start raising a lot more, right? But this solver isn't doing that. Okay, so again, slightly off there. You can see this is hard for me to get like exactly right in every spot. It's not super easy, and it takes a lot of practice, but this is the best way to learn, is pragmatic studying, not just sitting staring at charts. Do we ever have a continue on this turn card to this sizing? We have no heart. Our pair is extremely vulnerable to being outdrawn by all of villain's bluffing range, even the stuff that doesn't have hearts. We don't really have 8x, but we have flushes. We have 3s and 5s, 4, 5, ace x. Yeah, I think this is a pure fold. Although we do unblock bluffs with the King, I think it's still a pure fold. Yeah, it's a pure fold. Pretty bad to call, actually. We're losing 8 chips, which is of course almost a big blind, so pretty horrific call to make. Here's another really important lesson about becoming a GTO beast. Was that less or more ridiculous than the last one? If you don't know whether the hand is a mix or a fold, but you know it's not a pure call, you should just fold. Don't mix an option into your strategy that may be wrong. If you know that one option is not wrong and you're not sure about the other one, take the one you know is not wrong. Sort of very common advice that will really serve you well when you're playing poker and when you're training, because you don't want to get shouted at by the trainer. That sucks. 10-9 with no backdoor. I don't think we can ever continue this hand on the flop. Pure fold. Not losing too much to call with these reasonable pair draws and backdoors. Only 1.72 chips, which is about 1/10 to 1/5 of a big blind. 7-6 with the spade. I mean, this hand looks appealing. Like, it looks like it could be a raise with the 6 of spades. I think this could be a raise, actually. I don't think I can call. I think it's going to mix raise and fold. I think it's going to be very close to 0 EV, and it's going to raise, mix, and fold. Raise and fold. These hands are typically like extremely dicey. Like, they're very fragile. And if you call with this hand, it's just quite hard to survive on turns. So raise, I think, is going to be a thing here. Do I want to raise at 25 or 50%? Because if it's 25, I'm going to fold, and if it's 50, I'm going to raise. I'm going to raise at 50. Okay, it was only 10%. Oh, I can call. Interesting. I didn't think I'd be able to call. Okay, technically call is minus EV, right? That's my excuse. It's losing like the tiniest little atom of a big blind. But yeah, this is interesting. I can call. So I'm never making this call in game because I just look at the hand and my brain goes, this is too terrible, but the pair draws are okay. You know, I can bluff later. It's probably not a big deal at this point. When you face a turn bet, really big deal that you have like 0 showdown value. On the flop, you have time to bluff. You have time to make up for that. So that's the idea there. So I was raising that a little bit too often. I was folding it about right, but then I didn't dilute my raise with call as I should be. That's kind of what was going on there. So again, we're just calibrating, you know, we're getting better and better as we practice. So this is the kind of hand I think will raise. I think this is a hybrid. It's very vulnerable. It has backdoors galore. It gains a lot by fold equity. It can turn and river the nuts in many different configurations. I think there'll be quite a bit of raise here, but I think on it won't be like more than 30% or something. So I'll raise it 25%. I'll call on this roll. It is about 30%, 35, yeah, okay. But rounding that to 50? No, rounding that down to 25. Because I don't deal in 35s, it's a little bit too cumbersome. Not trying to become like the solver, you know, just trying to become a human that's good at GTO. It's a very important distinction between becoming a solver and becoming a human that's good at GTO. Check, check, and I think our showdown value is just absolutely fine here. We do have a big range advantage. We would want to bluff like quite a lot of our king high, queen high combos, etc. Maybe even some ace high, but not 5 deuce. This is going to be a check, as you can see. And then when we face a bet, this is, I'm glad this came up, right? The first river bet we've actually faced. Okay, so our hand is a bluff catcher. We beat every one of villain's bluffs. That's a good thing. Our hand is not a value beater. We don't beat any value bet. And our hand is not frail because we don't lose to any bluffs. So it is a bluff catcher by the terminology I use in my school. That means that we need to assess its blocker properties. The 5, I think, is reasonable here. I don't think villain is bluffing with a 5 very often on this node. And that's for 2 reasons. 1, a 5 is a straight or it doesn't exist most of the time. Secondly, it's going to have bet turn when it is queen 5 or something, king 5. These hands will bet turn really often. So I think the 5 is a good blocker. The deuce doesn't really block any value bets. I think deuces will usually bet turn. There are no 2 pair containing the deuce and the 9. So we're not blocking many value bets. We are unblocking bluffs though. Seems like an average bluff catcher, and an average bluff catcher will usually mix. I don't think I want to raise here with a non-spade, that's interesting actually. What the hell are my raises? Something with 1 spade, I would imagine. It's just way better for blocking random flushes that slow play turn. So I'm gonna guess this hand is a mix. I don't think it's that bad a call. I think something like queen deuce would be a much worse call. I'm gonna guess it's a mix. On a 21, I'm gonna call it. Yeah, so that seems about right. I didn't actually say a frequency of what I was gonna call it. I was thinking 50-50 or something like that. So we got it right. It's not a raise, it is a call. That's all you can do, you know? You just have to, there's villain's sort of random card that he's bluffing with, a random king or a random queen that's not a spade, is usually the thing you'll want to unblock there when you are bluff catching. Okay, let's do one more spot, and I'm going to give you the last rendition of the GTO Beast slogan, and then we are going to wrap it for today. Okay, 1/3 pot here, ace 9. Obviously the question is, how often do we raise? I think it's always, probably, and I'm going to raise. It's pretty much always. We can simplify that to 100%, although interestingly, calling doesn't lose any EV. One quick point, what are the chances that in reality the EV of these 2 options is exactly the same? 0. So one is better than the other. Your job in reality is not to copy the robot. Your job in reality is to try and figure out which one is better, if you can. I don't know, it would take a bit of thought. You know, if people over bluff later, you want to slow play. If people under bluff later, you probably want to raise. If people are too tight against raises, you want to slow play. If people are too loose against raises, you want to raise. It's that sort of thought process you need. Okay, having raised, is this a candidate to slow play? Well, we do unblock some bets, but because we block the ace here, we're going to block the value betting range of villain. And I think, therefore, he's going to check back fairly often if we check this hand. We also unblock draws and pair plus draw type hands, like ace-x of hearts that will check back. I think we should bet here, probably always, and I'm going to go for b75. Okay, so we were allowed to check, but again, it's mostly betting. So we can slow play. Our blockers aren't so condensing of villain's range that we can't slow play. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the Carrot Poker skill. Condensing and polarizing. Blockers great, 2 lights for 5. And then onto the 7 of clubs. Is our hand still value bettable? It's our question to solve here before we wrap up today. I think it is. I think it's value bettable. Would we want to slow play it? I mean, we do unblock some bluffs, but generally in these situations, you don't do a lot of slow playing because you've heavily condensed your opponent's range. You've kind of squashed it towards middling combos, and there won't be a ton of air here. He will have like some King X of hearts to bluff, which we do unblock. Maybe this is a hand we can slow play. God, I really don't know. We've rolled a 5, so I'm definitely going to bet. And I guess I'd be 75 again. I don't think I would be jamming this combo, so let's do this. So that's fine, but we could also have checked, or we could also have gone all in. Okay, interesting. I was thinking all in might be a little bit of a stretch just because we block like the top pair and the second pair. And usually when you have those kind of blockers, you don't go all in. But because this all in is only a little bit more than pot, it's 134%, it's not like 2x pot, then I guess it's okay. You can slow play this hand because you're unblocking some bluffs, and Villain, if he understands River Blunder Theorem, should be bluffing his heart hands. If you made it this far in the video, your reward is to hear the most ridiculous rendition of our slogan today, and I hope you have enjoyed joining me in this quest to become GTO Beast. I'll see you in the next installment of How to Become a GTO Beast. Bye bye.